What's up guys, and welcome back to the second video in my Python tutorial series. In this video we will cover everything you need to know about conditional statements in Python. So there are three conditional statements. There's the if statement, there's the elif statement, which just means else if, and there's the else statement. And we use these statements super frequently when we're programming to allow our code to do different things based off of different conditions. So for example, if let's say I wanted certain code to run if a number was greater than 1,000, I could do if number greater than 1,000, do this. And then I could do else if that number is less than 1,000, do some other code. I'll post an outline for this video in the comments. So if you're trying to find a specific thing, look there. And also I'll post a cheat sheet to all the commands we've covered in this video in the description. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future tutorials. But without further ado, let's just jump into this tutorial. Alright, to begin, as always, open up Sublime Text 3 and save a new Python file with a name something like lesson2.py. So in the last video we went over variables and we showed that things like a equals 1 and then printing a would give us 1 down here. Just wanted to expand upon that and just mention a couple more advanced things about variables real quick. Goes to, I can print right below it, print b. And as you can see, 1 and 2. I also want to mention that you can also set a new variable as, this was probably shown in the last video but not maybe explicitly made clear. It goes a plus b. And that will give us, we print c down here, that will give us 3, because it's 2 plus 1. So yeah, you can set variables that have combinations of other variable names. One thing that you might not understand right up the top, right from the start, is that if I did something like a equals 5 after this, it doesn't change what c is. Once c has been set, it's pointing to a concrete number 3. And this a equals 5 doesn't change it. So even though this a right here now prints 5, this b still prints 2. This c right here was set to 1 at the time it was added and set, so it just prints out 3 down here. So I just wanted to quickly go over that. Might have made sense already to you, but in case it didn't, I thought it would be helpful to show that. Alright, so let's start with conditional statements. If, elif, which means else if, and else. So we'll do this with the concept of grades. So I mean, most people are familiar with grades. 0 is the worst, 100 is the best, and you can get anything in between. So we're gonna save a variable called grade here. I'll make this a little bit bigger. And I'm gonna say, let's say we wanted to print out different things based on what your grade was. So start off with grade equals 90 or something like that. And we can write an if statement that prints out like you passed if you got over a 70, let's say. So to do this, we use the statement if grade is greater than 70. And then you always have to end an if statement with a colon. And then I can say print you passed. So now I'm going to run this, and you see down here it says you passed. So we can do, this is the greater than sign. We can also do, so if I set this to 70 here, it doesn't say I pass. So we can also, in addition to the greater than sign, we can do the greater than or equal to sign. You passed, yay. And if I did like 50 here now, doesn't say that. We can also do, instead of the greater than or equal to sign, it's probably pretty intuitive, we can do the less than sign. So if grade is less than 50, or less than 70, we'll write, you failed. Come on, do better. You failed. So this is the if statement. It's an if, then you have an operator here, and then it ends with a colon, and then you have to make sure whenever you use an if statement, you have to make sure it's indented properly. So you see how this is indented? So on the screen it's pushed in one tab. So whenever we're using the Python language, to know if something is inside of it is whether or not it's indented. So right now, if I tried running this, it doesn't work because the if statement, by the nature of how it's constructed, expects an indented block. So make sure to press tab to put it inside. So whenever you want something inside, you really have to be careful to indent it. And I'm always pressing the tab key when I want to indent. I don't want to use spaces because it's a little hard to get proper, and it will give you some trouble if you're mixing spaces with tab. So I recommend pressing the tab key. All right, so if grade is less than 70, you failed. And we could say something like, if grade is less than or equal to 69, you failed. And if I put this as 70 now or something, like, it won't say that. So that's the if statement. But you know what, right now it's kind of annoying because we're printing out you failed, but we're not, like, we can't print you passed and you failed in the same little stanza, I guess. So that's where the else statements comes in. So we have the if statement, and we're gonna also want to have the else statement. So that's just, whenever you use the else statement, you never use a condition. So you don't like do like greater than 69. That's for the elif. It's not the else. So whenever we use else, just use else. And then same with if, you have to end it with a colon. So I'm gonna change this up again. I'm gonna just change this back to 70. I'm gonna change this to greater than or equal to, and I'm gonna change this to 90 right now. Else, so basically what this is saying is if grade is greater than or equal to 70, right? Print, you passed. And you can write whatever message you want in here. You can change up grade to be something else, doesn't matter. And then else, so what else means in this case is if grade is greater than or equal to 70, the else condition would be everything that's not greater than or equal to 70. So another way to say that would be everything that's less than 70. Print, you failed. So 90 says you passed. If I change this to 50, Control S, Control B, you failed. I could change this to something like negative 100, which wouldn't make sense, but it would still say you failed. I could change this to something like a huge number, it would say you passed. So we also might want to have, like, so one thing we'll move towards is how do we get it to say also whether or not the grade is valid. Maybe we would want to like handle non-valid grades because grades have to be between 0 and 100, and we'll take care of that in a sec. First, before we do that, I want to kind of make specific the else if block. So in addition to if, we have elif. So maybe I would want to say elif grade is greater than or equal to 80. Print, you got a B. Do better next time. Well, that's actually pretty good. Let's just say, pretty good job. I don't want to hate on B's. B's are a fine, totally fine grade. Good job. And I'm also going to switch this instead of be greater than or equal to 70. I'm going to make this greater than or equal to 90 just to kind of go from big to small. So it's going to be, you got an A. Super. I don't know why this spacing's so weird. I feel like that's going to annoy some people. I'll make it better. All right, so now if I put grade as something like 100, you got an A, super. If I made it something like 85, that would fall into this elif block. So the elif block, this is all part of the same execution flow, if that makes sense. So if I do grade greater than 85, you got a B, pretty good job. And the difference between it falling into that and like something like 95 is it only executes once. So even though the grade is greater than 90 and it's also greater than 80, because it's part of this if, elif, else, it's only ever going to enter one of these. So it enters the first one that it is valid in. And if it's not valid in any condition, it will print you failed. That would be the else block. So if none of these evaluate to true, so what happens when you, if I was to print something out like this, so if I was just to print grade is greater than or equal to 90, and I was just to comment all of this out temporarily, when I ran this, it would just say true here. So this is the Boolean variable that we talked about in the last video. And so if these Booleans are true, it enters it, and it enters it if it's indented. And also make sure to have this colon. So the difference between the if and the elif is that if I change this instead of elif to if, like another if I ran the 95 again, it now enters both of these. So it enters the grade equals greater than or equal to 90, and it also enters greater than or equal to 80. So if you want it to be separate things and be able to evaluate to true multiple times, you'd use multiple if statements. But if you only want one thing to ever execute, you'd use if, elif, else. Okay, let's see what else should we do. Also, we could switch this up. I've showed you greater than, I've showed you less than, I've showed you greater than or equal to, I've showed you less than or equal to. Another important one is just equal to. And so you might initially just be like, okay, let's just say we got a perfect score. That's all we cared about. We were super strict with how we did, and only 100 was acceptable for us. So you might think to just put if grade is equal to 100, print this is an acceptable grade. We're super strict. Only 100 is acceptable. Acceptable grade. And then I'd do like else print you are a failure. Yeah, just if you didn't get 100, you're a failure. Totally joking, but you get the point. I'm just making an example. So it gives me this error down here. If grade equals 100, gives me invalid syntax. So it's like, why did it do that? That kind of annoys me. Why won't it accept an equal sign? It accepts greater than signs. It accepts less than signs. So the thing is here, this is something super important to remember, is that when we set variables, we only use one equal sign. So the one equal sign is reserved for setting variables. If we want to actually use an equal sign as like an operator to compare two things, we need to use a double equal sign. So now I have if grade equals 100, and I'll run that. And as you can see, if I run that one more time, you are a failure. Sorry, you got a 95, not good enough. Even if you got like a 99.9999, it's not equal to 100, so it's gonna still say you are a failure. And so this is equal to, and then there's one more operator you should know, and that will be not equals to. So if the grade is not equal to 100, this is pretty much the same exact thing, but we're just switching around the order. So now it's going to run, it's going to hit this block. So it's not equal to 100. So this is not equal sign. Exclamation point, then equal sign is not equals to. So to recap that, we have 4 different operators. We have, or why did I say 4? We have less than, we have greater than, we have less than or greater. Let me just do that. We have less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and not equal to. So remember these operators, they're super important. And that's we also went through the flow of if, else, if, and else. Okay, let's delete that for a second. Oh, actually, one more thing I probably should go over. So we're going to go back to the greater than example. So for a second, we'll do greater than 70, let's say. And we'll go back to saying you passed. And else you failed. So one thing that's important to note is that in addition to using these operators that I'm highlighting on the screen, we can also use two kind of conjunctive, I don't know if that was a real word at all, two words that can combine expressions. So one thing I mentioned before is right now this would accept the grade one. How many zeros is that? I don't know. I'm too stressed out. I could pass in, okay, I'm actually going to count. 1 billion. Okay. I pass in the grade 1 billion and it still says you passed. I want it to instead say, like, this is not a valid grade. So I could do something like if grade is greater than 100, print not a valid grade, right? And I run that. And we'll make this, you see how I ran both of them? That's because this is an if statement instead of an elif. So now it just says not a valid grade. But still, this doesn't quite fix our problem. So if I typed in negative 100, which, I don't know, maybe you did really badly on the test and you get negative 100, but that's just going to say you failed right now. But we would rather it just say the same thing, not a valid grade. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a statement called or. So I'm going to say if grade is greater than 100 or. So or is an acceptable phrase in Python. Grade is less than 0. Print not a valid grade. And as you can see, it says not a valid grade here. So that fixed our problem. So now I can type in only valid 0 to 100 numbers to get you passed or you failed. So this or right here, one thing to note about it, I might have this pop up on the screen, I'm not sure, but only one of these things has to be true. So, so either grade has to be greater than 100, so if I did like 1,000, that's true, but grade less than 0 is not true in that case. So true or false works. False or true works, and then true and true. So like if they're both true, it still passes. There's a statement also called and. So this means that both of them have to be true. So right now it says you passed because and is the improper statement to use here, because that would say grade has to be greater than 100 and grade has to be less than 0. Okay. So and means both have to be true, or just means one has to be true, but both can be true. So that's useful, also very useful to know. Let's move forward. If statements, they don't just work with numbers, they also can work with strings, for example. So I could do something like if, let's say our name. So my name, as it says in the YouTube description, is Keith. And make sure you remember whenever we're using strings, these are called strings. The actual text is called strings. Make sure that you surround them with quotations. And it doesn't matter if you use single or double quotations, both work just fine, but you just have to be consistent. So I could say something like name equals Keith, if name equals Keith, then print, let's say we'll print, wow, what a cool name. So run that, and what the heck, it didn't work. So be careful when you're comparing strings. You have to make sure that capitalization is exactly how it is in both things. Because this doesn't have the same capitalization, it didn't actually run this. So I'm going to fix this, and I'm just going to say if name equals Keith. And there are ways that I'll cover in future videos that you can like lowercase every letter in a word and have them just make sure that the letters are the same. That will be in a video on strings. Now it says, wow, what a cool name. So that worked with strings. You could do something like, let's say we were making a game and we wanted it to, so let's have a variable called game over equals true. And I could say something like this too. If game over equals true, then we want to print, we'll just say like, let's say this game, you lost or something, right? You lost. So if I run that, it says you lost. And this is called a boolean. But one thing to note with when you're using booleans, if you want to have like the proper coding syntax or proper Python like convention, is it's redundant to say if game over equals true, because game over is true, right? And this if statement works on whether something is true or false. So when I'm going to do it one more time just to show you guys. When I before did something like grade equals 90, and then I did print grade is greater than or equal to 85, let's say. This whole statement evaluates to true by itself. So if I did that, it evaluates to true. This is printing true. So when I go back and I take this line here, if game over equals true, it's redundant to do equals true. We should just do if game over. Now that still works. And if game over was false, because this is basically saying if game over set to true in the last example, and so it's basically saying if true, and whenever something's true in an if statement, it enters it, and it always, remember, indents for enter. I can't do this, won't be proper syntax. Cool. And also note that you could have nested if statements. So if we were going back to our grades example, I could say grade equals 87, let's say. I could have a set of statements that look like this. If grade is greater than 80, comma, or we'll go big to small. So if grade is greater than 90, print you got an A. And then elif grade is greater than greater than 80, print you got a B. Right. So I could do that. I run it. Works. Oh shoot! What happened? Whenever we have elif, we have to have. What is the problem here? Oh, I just said elif grade 80. Elif grade greater than 80. Print you got a B. And so in this case, it says you got a B. We could nest if statements within this elif. So I could say if grade is less than 83, I'll say print you got a B minus. And I can do the same thing. elif grade is less than, we'll say 86. I will say less than 87, actually. I don't really know what the technical convention is. My high school actually didn't use letter grades really at all. My college, let's see, MIT, used mostly numbers too. I guess letter grades on our transcript. But it was mostly like we just had A's, B's, and C's, not A minus, A plus, etc. elif grade is less than 87, you got a B, and then finally, else. So that only case, because this is saying greater than 80, and these are all less than 83, less than 87. The only other case would be like less than 90. So I don't even have to specifically write that. I can just say print you got a B plus. All right, and now I run this. okay, let's see what happens. So 87, you got a B plus. If I did 81, you got a B minus. So I nested the if statements within another set of if statements, and that's totally fine. Else, I'll just print you got a C or worse. And this wouldn't handle the those weird cases, the above 100 and below 0 that I mentioned previously. But cool, that's if statement. We've gone over if statements, we've gone over elif, we've gone over else, we've gone over nesting them, we've gone over down here all the different operators you can have. And then I also just want to explicitly write out there's the two statements to combine them, and or. Also, it's worth mentioning that you can specify the ordering of these and or with parentheses. So I'm going to add this to this little comment. So what I mean by this is if I delete all of this code up here, I could write a statement like this. I could write if false and false or true. So when you have an and statement, you need both things around it, or everything in the and statement to be true. When you have an or statement, you need either one or the other to be true. So we'll do print past or something. So we're going to see if this goes through. And as you can tell, it does go through. And the reason for this one to go through is because it does if false and false, it evaluates that first, and that evaluates to false. And then it does if false or true, and has the one true, so it evaluates to true. However, if I added in parentheses right here, I would do if false and false or true. This would now evaluate first, and false or true becomes true. And now it runs and it doesn't pass. And I can show you it doesn't pass. So parentheses can be used and are super important in making sure you kind of can group things together that need to be grouped together. And also I realized I just missed one other word. You can also write not. So I could do something like print not true, and it'll just do the reverse of true, which is false. I do the same thing with false, not false, true. And this could be useful in the case that maybe we were playing a game and I had game over equals true or equals false, and you wanted something to happen if not game over, you would like have your keep playing code in the middle here. So like keep playing. All right, so not and or parentheses, all of this. Pretty good. All right, I'm going to end this video with a challenge problem. I'll answer this challenge problem in the next video I post in this series. And the challenge problem is as follows. So I want you guys to try to figure out if you can write a set of conditional statements, so if, elif, and else's, to find out whether or not a number is a so-called special number. And I'm going to define special numbers. So write a set of conditional statements to find out whether or not a number is a special number. I'll make this a little smaller so you can see. All right, special number. So I'm going to say that special numbers are numbers that are less than 100 or greater than or equal to 300, and they are perfectly divisible by 3, 7, or both. So I'll write that down here. So special numbers are defined as numbers less than 100 or greater than or equal to 300 that are perfectly divisible by 3, 7, or both. And I want you to do the following. If it is divisible by both and it is a special number, I want you to print out divisible by both. If it's just divisible by 3 and it's a special number, I want you to just do divisible by 3. So this is divisible by 3 but not 7. And then finally, the last one is I want you to print out divisible by 7 if it's a special number, divisible by 7 but not 3. And then finally, if it is not less than 100 or greater than or equal to 300 or not divisible by 3 or 7, I want you to print out not a special number. So this is the task. And I'll put this in the description. So this challenge problem will be in the description. So try this out. And if you can figure it out, post your code in the comments here. And I'll try to get back to everyone that posts in the comments on whether or not you are correct and what you can improve on. I'll also put the answer to this problem in the start of the next video. And if you want a hint, I'll tell a hint right now. If you don't want the hint, just start trying this problem. But here is the hint. So a hint is, if you want to find if something is perfectly divisible, you can use this % sign. So I covered this in the math video. So if, let's say we had number equals 52. If I wanted to see if that was perfectly divisible by 2, I could do if number modulo divided by 2 equals 0. Print like even. So as you can see, it's an even number. If I switch this to like 57, it would not say even. And so it's basically just saying it's dividing it by 2 and looking at the remainder. This is just saying if the remainder is 0. So you can use this with 3 and 7, and that gets you a good start to this problem. All right, thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, as always. Make sure to like this video and also subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be posting the next tutorial video in this series by next week, so stay tuned for that. That's all I got. Peace.